Jimmy Fallon frozen when Sandra Bullock suddenly stops laughing after seeing this old photo. Sandra Bullock stopped laughing. The sentence she had been building simply ended, mid-word, mid-breath. And Jimmy Fallon had just placed a photograph on the desk between them. Slid it from an envelope in the easy way you slide something across when you expect the reaction to be warm and simple. Sandra picked it up. She looked at it. And for 6 full seconds, one of the most naturally, reliably funny people in Hollywood sat completely still and said absolutely nothing. The laugh was gone. Whatever replaced it was quieter and deeper and had no name in the vocabulary of late-night television. Jimmy Fallon stopped smiling before he understood why. Nobody in the room moved. Nobody reached for anything. The room simply went with her, the way rooms do when something real has entered them. It was a Tuesday evening in the spring of 2024. The Tonight Show studio was full and warm with the particular energy of an audience that had come for someone they genuinely loved, not admired at a careful distance, but loved the way people love the performers who have walked beside them through 20 or 30 years of their own lives. Sandra Bullock carries that kind of love into rooms without appearing to carry anything at all, and the audience gave it back the moment she appeared in the wings. The interview had been running for 11 minutes, and it was going beautifully. Loose, funny, full of laughter that started in something real and kept going. Jimmy was delighted in the unperformed way he gets delighted when the guest is actually making him laugh. The band was easy. The crowd was with them completely. A segment producer with 20 years in late-night television said afterward she had watched the first 11 minutes from the control room, with the specific pleasure of something that doesn't need to be helped. The Tonight Show control room still talks about what changed in the 4 minutes that followed. Jimmy reached under the desk and produced a plain, white envelope. The kind, without a window, slightly handled at the corners. He explained that it had arrived at the show by post from a family in Germany several weeks earlier. The accompanying note had contained one sentence, that they hoped the photograph inside might mean something to her. He opened the envelope and slid out what was there. Not a studio photograph, not a film still or a press image or anything composed by professionals under controlled light. Just a photograph. Old, edges worn soft. The colors shifted the way colors shift after 50 years, into warmth and amber and the specific palette of things that happened before the world went digital. 2 people in a small kitchen. Flour on the counter, both of them laughing at the same thing, mid-moment, not posing. A child with dark hair and flour on both hands. An older woman beside her, eyes bright, caught completely off guard by whatever had just been funny. Sandra took the photograph from the desk. She looked at it. She looked at it for a long time. And then, the laughing stopped. The entire studio froze. Jimmy's expression held its shape for 1 beat too long, and then quietly changed. The wrong explanations arrived immediately. The photograph had contained something painful. Someone had sent something that should not have been sent. A line had been accidentally crossed somewhere in the booking process. But Sandra Bullock was not in pain. She was sitting completely still, holding the photograph in both hands, with the expression of someone who has just located something they did not know they had been looking for all this time. The room held. Then she spoke. Her voice was barely above a whisper, but caught perfectly by her microphone. She said 2 words. A name. Tante Hildy. 300 people held their breath. To understand what happened next, you need to understand what happened in 1974. Sandra Bullock wasn't always Sandra Bullock, Oscar-winning actress, one of the most enduring and beloved presences in American cinema for more than 3 decades. In the summer of 1974, she was 9 years old and living in Nuremberg, West Germany, in a 3rd-floor apartment in a tall building near the old city center. Her mother, Helga, was a trained opera singer who performed across Germany and Austria, with companies that moved on a schedule dictated by the music and the bookings, not by the school calendar or any family's convenience. Her father followed the productions and managed the logistics. Sandra grew up in the motion of it. Nuremberg as a base, Vienna as a second home, the train as a familiar place, and the particular skill of a child who has learned to feel at home in gaps. She attended school in German, learned the language by immersion and necessity, and built a childhood that was neither fully American nor fully German, but was entirely hers. She was fluent in the in-between. When her mother was on tour, and the schedule made it impossible to take Sandra along, there was Hilde. Hilda Weber lived 2 floors below the Bullocks in the same building on Luitpoldstrasse, a 42-year-old widow whose own children were grown and whose apartment had become, as a result, a quiet and ordered place where things proceeded at whatever pace she decided they should. Her kitchen was the heart of the apartment. Something was always baking or cooling or about to be started. She spoke no English. Sandra's German in the summer of 1974 was functional, but incomplete. They got along entirely without that being a problem. Hilda communicated the way people communicate when language has run out, through the specific directness of someone who has decided that a child at her door deserves to be let in properly, not managed carefully. She called Sandra Kleines. Little one, Sandra called her Tante Hild. Aunt Hild. Neither of them ever discussed these names or formally agreed to them. They simply began. Sandra stayed with Hilda for stretches of 2 and 3 weeks when Helga was on tour. Hilde walked her to school in the mornings and picked her up in the afternoons, and in the evenings she taught her to make things in the kitchen. Lebkuchen in December, Pflaumenkuchen when the plums came in late summer, brazen on ordinary Saturday mornings with no occasion at all. Sandra was not a natural baker. The Lebkuchen burned every Christmas for the first 4 years. Hilda corrected her with the same patient repetition she seemed to apply to everything. Not making it a lesson, just doing it again until it worked. Sandra learned to measure by feel before she learned to measure by the recipe. She has credited this, privately, to Hilde, though she has never said so publicly. The photograph was taken in Hilda's kitchen in August of 1974. Hilda's grown son had come to visit for an afternoon and had brought a camera. He had found the 2 of them mid-bake and mid-laugh. Sandra at the counter with flour on both hands, Hilda beside her in the middle of trying to correct something that had already gone wrong with the dough, both of them laughing at the same moment without any photographer having asked them to. The film was developed after Sandra and her family had left Nuremberg. Hilde put the photograph in a wooden frame and placed it on the kitchen wall, where it stayed for the next 50 years. They lost touch the way people lose touch when a child moves back to another country and the decades begin to accumulate. Hilde would not have known how to reach Sandra once she became who she became, and the thought of being a nuisance to someone that famous seemed. To a woman like Hilde, not something a person with any dignity would consider. She watched every film. She kept the photograph on the wall. She told her granddaughter Lena once the story of Kleines and the kitchen, and of the Lebkuchen that always burned. 11 months before the Tonight Show appearance, Hilde received her diagnosis. Advanced congestive heart failure. Her doctors gave her a timeline measured in months. Lena, who was 28 and spoke English, sat down one evening and wrote a letter to the Tonight Show's booking office. She scanned the photograph and included it. She did not tell Hilde she had done it. Someone from the show called within 24 hours. The arrangement was made in complete secrecy. The Tonight Show staff was told only that a specific guest had been arranged for the 4th row. Sandra had made one request when she spoke to the producers. I want her to feel like a person, not a moment. Subscribe and leave a comment, because the most powerful part of this story is still ahead. Behind the scenes, Sandra Bullock had made a decision that defied every producer's expectation. She had asked the show to place the photograph on Jimmy's desk in a plain envelope, without any context or explanation. She had not told Jimmy what it was or who had sent it. She had also been carrying the original print, the actual photograph from Hildy's kitchen wall, brought to New York in a padded case by Lena, in the inside pocket of her jacket since she arrived at the studio that afternoon. But this is the moment no one in the studio and no one watching at home ever saw coming. Sandra Bullock set the copy of the photograph face up on the desk and stood up from her chair. She looked at the audience without attempting to compose herself or explain herself to the cameras. She said to the room, quietly and directly, "I am 9 years old in this picture. The woman next to me looked after me in Nuremberg for years while my mother was on tour. She spoke no English. I spoke almost no German. None of that mattered to her. I have not seen her in 50 years. Her family sent this photograph to the show because she is sick and she asked to come tonight. And she is sitting in this room right now." She looked at the fourth row. Hilda Weber was already being helped to her feet by Lena, carefully, slowly, all 92 years of her rising with the deliberate economy of someone who has learned not to rush what the body needs time for. She was smaller than Sandra remembered. Her hair was entirely white. Her hands, when Sandra reached them, were cool and very light, but her eyes were exactly the same, calm and direct and watching, giving nothing unnecessary to the moment. Sandra took both of Hild's hands in hers. "Tante Hildy." Barely above a whisper, but the microphone caught every word. Kleines, Hild's voice was slow, accented, and entirely steady. "I've been looking for you for years." Sandra shook her head. "I am not so difficult to find." Hilda's expression was practical, almost amused. "I burned the Lepkuchen again. Last Christmas." Sandra's voice broke at the edge of the sentence and then held. Hilda made a small sound, not quite a laugh, not quite a sigh. "You always burned them. You were never a bother." Sandra held her hands more firmly. "I need you to know that. You were my Kleines," Hilda said simply. "That is enough." Sandra reached into the inside pocket of her jacket and produced the original print, the wooden frame removed. The photograph itself, 50 years old, soft at the edges. She held it so both of them could see it. "It belongs with you," Hilda said. "It belongs with both of us," Sandra said. She pressed it gently into Hilda's hands and kept her fingers there for a moment. Jimmy Fallon had come around from behind his desk and was standing at the edge of the stage, both hands at his sides, not attempting to fill the silence with anything. After a long moment, he said, barely audible, "Folks, let's just let this happen." The director did not cut to commercial. The cameraman in the aisle did not pull back. Questlove had set his drumsticks on the snare rim and was standing behind his kit, looking toward the fourth row. The applause began somewhere near the front of the audience and moved steadily backward through every row, the way a wave moves, not from force, but from something that needs no explanation. Share and subscribe. Make sure this story is never forgotten. Hilda Weber passed away on a Saturday morning in September, 18 weeks after that Tuesday evening. Lena said she had been comfortable and had spoken of the night in the weeks that followed, not the cameras or the studio or any of the production. Only the moment Sandra had taken her hands in the fourth row and they had looked at the photograph together. The original print went back to Nuremberg with Lena. It hangs now in the kitchen of the apartment on Luitpoldstrasse, in the same wooden frame, in the same place on the wall where it had been for 50 years. Lena has changed nothing else in the room. Sandra Bullock has a copy in her home in Los Angeles. She has not labeled it or explained it to visitors. It requires no explanation from anyone who looks at it long enough. 2 people in a kitchen, flour on the counter, both of them laughing at exactly the same moment. Some people look after you for a little while. It turns out to be the rest of your life.